The twin suns of Varsa burned high in the sky, sending waves of heat across the wide desert plain. Wind carried dust that scratched against every face and every metal plate of armor. The Skrull clan moved like a storm, their heavy boots striking the cracked ground as they surrounded the old human salvage site. Their armor was dark with jagged marks, each mark a story of a fight won. The people of the desert had learned to fear the Skrull, for they were known as hunters who bowed to no one and demanded submission from all. At the center of the circle stood Amir, a lone human with a simple toolkit strapped across his shoulder. His clothes were worn and dusty from weeks of work. He was not a soldier, not a warrior, not even one with a weapon. He was a repairer, someone who worked with old parts of machines left behind by other travelers. His hands were rough from labor and his face showed the tired lines of long days under the sun. Yet he stood straight, his eyes calm and his lips curved in a small, quiet smile. The ground shook as Cora, leader of the Skrull raiding party, stepped forward. She was tall and powerful, her voice carrying across the plain like thunder. She raised her heavy spear, its blade glowing with energy, and shouted in the ancient tongue of her people before turning her words into human speech. Her voice roared with pride and anger. "I will kill you, human, if you do not kneel." The circle of warriors cheered and struck their weapons against their shields. Dust rose around them and the sound was like rolling thunder. To the Skrull, this was tradition. Any who resisted must bow or die. Their leader had given the command and now all waited for the answer. Amir did not bow. He did not tremble. He did not cry out. He stood as he was, his hand resting gently on the strap of his toolkit. His eyes met Cora's without fear. Then slowly, his lips stretched into the same calm smile he had carried since the raid began. The Skrull grew restless. Some shouted for blood. Others looked to their leader for the next strike. But Cora held up her hand, silencing the circle. She expected fear, screams, perhaps begging. What she saw instead was a man who looked as if the threat of death was no more than a passing shadow. The outpost workers, humans and traders who had hidden behind broken walls, watched the scene with wide eyes. They knew the Skrull. They knew what followed such a roar. No one had ever stood against them without trembling. Amir's stillness brought a silence heavier than any chain. Cora narrowed her eyes. "You smile at death, human. Do you think yourself greater than the Skrull?" Amir shook his head. His voice was steady, not loud, but it carried through the dry air. "No, I think myself a worker. I fix things. I do not kneel because I cannot work with my hands pressed to the ground. I stand because it is the only way I know." The warriors muttered. Some laughed at his words. Others frowned, for the human's tone carried no insult, no challenge, only a strange honesty. Cora studied him, searching for weakness, but found only that small smile and a calm that felt foreign to her. Behind Amir lay the broken remains of a cargo hauler. Its hull was cracked, its power core leaking faint sparks. To the Skrull it was nothing, just another ruined machine. To Amir it was work unfinished, another puzzle to solve. He pointed toward it with a slow movement. "This ship can still give energy. If I repair it, it can light fires, run water pumps, maybe even carry goods. You could take it, use it, trade it. It is worth more than my life. I offer this instead of kneeling." The Skrull warriors laughed again, shaking their heads at the madness of a human offering trade when death hung so close. But among them, a young scout holding a small broken toy looked down at the object in his hand. It was a simple spinning top of metal, cracked in half during the raid. He whispered about how the human might fix it. Cora's eyes flashed toward the scout, then back at Amir. She raised her spear higher, the glow brighter, ready to strike and end this strange meeting. Yet something in the air shifted. The man did not flinch. He did not beg. He smiled as if he carried a secret strength that could not be cut by a blade. The silence grew again. Even the desert wind seemed to pause, waiting. The first part of the story closed not with blood, but with a question. A question that even Cora herself could not answer. Why did this human smile when death stood over him? And what did he truly carry that made him stand so calm before the roar of the Skrull leader? The circle of Skrull warriors waited for their leader to give the order. Spears glowed with energy and shields rattled as heavy fists struck them in rhythm. Every beat was like a call for blood. The desert air shook with that sound. Yet Cora did not strike. Her spear stayed raised, but her eyes studied Amir more closely. She had seen many humans before. Most had cried or begged, Some had tried to run, and those had been cut down. None had stood still with such calm. None had spoken of work and trade instead of fear. The more Cora looked, the more she felt a strange unease. Amir saw the tension in her face but did not change his manner. His smile was quiet, not mocking. His voice, when he spoke again, was steady. "You could take my life, but it would end with nothing. If you let me fix what is broken, it might bring you value. Even small things can carry power when repaired." The words made some of the warriors laugh again, but their laughter was less certain now. They had expected weakness. They had expected fear. Instead, the human spoke of work as if work was greater than death. Cora lowered her spear slightly but kept her stance firm. "You think your hands are worth more than your life?" Amir answered without hesitation. "Hands that can build and mend are life. They give light when all is dark. They bring water when the ground is dry. They make safety where there is none. My life is not in kneeling. It is in using these hands to make things whole." The young scout who held the broken toy stepped forward without thinking. His armor was too large for him, his voice still untested by war. He held out the cracked metal top. "Can you fix this, human?" he asked. The circle turned toward him in surprise. Cora's eyes narrowed. The scout had broken order, but the question could not be taken back. All eyes returned to Amir. Amir bent his head slightly as if to greet the young one. "Yes, if you allow me, I can fix it." He reached into his small toolkit. With careful fingers, he brought out a tiny torch and a strip of bonding wire. The Skrull muttered among themselves. To them, tools were for smiths or slaves, not for warriors standing under the spear of a leader. Yet Amir knelt, not in surrender but in work. His hands moved with practice. Sparks danced softly in the dry air. He pressed the cracked edges together, sealed them, and polished the surface until the top shone again. Then he handed it back to the scout. The young Skrull turned the toy in his hands. For the first time in weeks, it spun when he set it on the ground. The little top whirled in the dust, catching sunlight. The boy's eyes widened with joy, and he gave a small laugh. That sound silenced the circle more than any roar. Cora frowned, torn between pride and doubt. She had come to demand fear and respect. Yet now her own scout smiled at the gift of a repaired toy. The human had shown no strength of body, yet he had touched the heart of her people in a way she had not expected. Amir rose and wiped the dust from his hands. His voice was calm as ever. "You see, even a broken thing can spin again if given care. What then of your great machines, your strong weapons, your power cores? If I can mend those, they will serve you better than my death." The warriors shifted uneasily. Some still wanted blood, but others began to wonder. To lose a chance at such skill felt like a waste. Cora's pride pressed her to strike, but her mind held her hand back. If she killed him now, her people might whisper that she had destroyed something useful. If she spared him, they might whisper that she had grown weak. The choice pulled at her like two chains in opposite directions. She raised her spear once more and declared, "You speak of hands and tools as if they are weapons. Let us see if that is true. We will test you, human. If you fail, your life ends. If you succeed, perhaps your work has worth." The warriors cheered, for a test was tradition. The desert wind rose again, carrying the sound far across the plain. Amir bowed his head slightly in agreement, though not in submission. "I will face your test." The outpost workers hiding in the ruins whispered to one another. Some thought Amir mad, some thought him blessed, but none could look away. The Skrull prepared for the trial. Spears struck shields again, but now the rhythm was faster, sharper. This was no call for slaughter, but a call for challenge. Amir's calm smile did not fade. He had not escaped danger. He had only stepped into a new storm. As the circle tightened and Cora pointed her spear toward the broken ruins at the edge of the plain, she spoke with fire in her voice. "Go there, human. Bring back what we demand. Show us if your hands are as strong as your smile." And so the test began. The warriors of the Skrull clan spread out as Cora gave her command. She pointed her glowing spear toward the ruins that lay half a mile across the desert plain. The ruins were jagged stone and metal, remains of an old settlement that storms and time had nearly buried. The test was clear. Amir must cross that dangerous ground and return with a banner left by past raiders. It was not only a race against the desert, but also against the traps of the old world. The circle of warriors parted, leaving a path open. Amir stepped forward without complaint. He tightened the strap of his toolkit and walked into the open plain. The heat pressed against him, and every step stirred dry dust into the air. Behind him, the Skrull began to chant. their deep voices rolling like thunder across the land. They expected to see him fall, but he kept walking with steady pace and the same quiet smile. The closer Amir came to the ruins, the louder the wind grew. Storm clouds gathered on the far horizon, heavy with sand. The ruins themselves looked like broken teeth rising from the desert, sharp and unwelcoming. Amir slowed as he reached the first wall of stone and twisted metal. He ran his hand across the surface, feeling the weakness of the structure. To rush forward without thought would mean death. He searched carefully, his eyes moving over every crack and shadow. Soon he found a narrow path through the rubble. It was dangerous, but it could be managed. Using his tools, Amir tied a thin rope from a broken beam above and lowered himself into the gap. The ground below shook as he landed, but he kept his balance. He moved with care, checking each step before placing his weight. As he moved deeper into the ruins, he heard the roar of the storm behind him. Sand began to whip against the stones, and the air turned harsh and dry. The Skrull warriors watched from afar, their eyes sharp, some smiling at the thought of the human being buried by the storm. But Amir did not falter. He pulled a piece of cloth from his kit and wrapped it around his mouth to block the dust. He pressed onward. Inside the ruins, the shadows grew longer. Old machines lay scattered, broken and rusted. Some were covered in sand, others cracked open from old battles. Amir's hands itched to repair them, but he knew time was short. Still, his eyes studied the machines, storing ideas for later. Even in danger, his mind searched for ways to bring broken things back to life. At last, he reached the central hall of the ruins. There, standing tall on a cracked pillar, was the banner of the Skrull raid from years ago. It was old, torn by storms, but its symbol of fire and steel was still clear. Amir moved toward it, but the ground beneath him shifted. The pillar began to crumble. Without hesitation, Amir dropped his toolkit and grabbed the edge. He pulled himself upward, stone cutting into his hands. With a final effort, he reached the banner and pulled it free. But the trial was not over. Behind him, part of the roof gave way. A young Skrull scout who had followed without order screamed as stones fell around him. The warriors on the plain shouted, but none could reach him in time. Amir did not stop to think. He ran to the boy, pushing aside heavy rocks with his bleeding hands. The scout was trapped under a slab of stone, his leg pinned. Amir pulled at the slab, but it was too heavy. He reached into his kit, pulled out a small cutting torch, and burned through the edge. Sparks flew as the torch hissed. At last the stone broke apart, and Amir pulled the scout free. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes. Amir gave him the same quiet smile. "Stand, we go back together." The storm grew worse as they left the ruins. Sand whipped across their faces, stinging their skin. Amir kept one arm around the boy to steady him as they moved step by step toward the waiting circle. His own body ached, his hands bled, but he kept moving. The banner fluttered in his other hand, proof of the trial completed. When at last they reached the circle of warriors, silence fell. The Skrull stared at the sight. The human had not only brought back the banner, but also carried one of their own to safety. This was no act of fear. This was no trick. It was courage of a kind they had not expected. Amir handed the banner to Cora with calm dignity. His words were simple. "The banner is yours. The boy is safe. My work is done." The boy leaned against Amir's side, too weak to stand alone. Cora looked from the banner to the human, then to the boy. Her pride told her to shout, to claim that the test was not passed. But her heart whispered that this human had shown more strength than any warrior who fought with blade. The circle of Skrull warriors did not cheer. They did not laugh. They stood in heavy silence, each one thinking of what they had seen. A human had risked his life not only to complete the trial but also to save one of their own. Amir stood tall, bloodied but calm, the same quiet smile on his face. He had faced the storm, the ruins, and the weight of stone, yet he had returned. And in that moment, even Cora felt a question rise in her heart. Could it be that strength was not only in the spear, but also in the hands that healed and saved? The desert wind carried that question far across the plain, and none could answer it. Not yet. The storm passed slowly, leaving the desert plain covered in dust. The ruins lay quiet once more, though broken stones and fallen beams still told the story of the trial. The Skrull warriors stood in silence, watching as Amir rested near the edge of the circle. The young scout he had saved sat close to him, his leg wrapped in cloth from the human's kit. The boy's eyes were full of respect, and he kept glancing at Amir as if trying to understand how a man so small in frame had carried such strength. Cora stood tall before her clan, the banner of the scrawl in her hands. The weight of tradition pressed on her shoulders. She was expected to show power, to strike fear, to hold the old ways. Yet the image of Amir pulling her scout from under the heavy stone stayed in her mind. It clashed with everything she had been taught since childhood. She walked forward, each step heavy with thought. She stopped in front of Amir, looking down at him. The warriors waited for her voice, ready to cheer if she gave the order for blood. Instead, Cora asked a question. "Human, why did you not leave the boy behind? He was not your kin. He was not your tribe. You could have walked away and saved only yourself." Amir raised his head. His face was tired, his hands still bleeding, but his smile was calm as always. "Because a life left behind is a wound that never heals. I could not walk away when help was possible. My hands are not only for machines. They are also for people." The answer unsettled the circle. Warriors who had once laughed at him now shifted uneasily. Mercy was not a word spoken often among the scrawl. To them, strength was in the spear and in the shield. Yet here stood a man who spoke of mercy as strength itself. Cora crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "Among my people, mercy is weakness. To save one is to risk all. A leader cannot choose the weak over the strong." Amir met her gaze without fear. "A leader who saves the weak does not lose strength. They gain trust, and trust builds more than fear ever can. Fear breaks when a stronger hand comes. Trust holds even in storms." The words cut deep into Cora's heart. She remembered her youth, the endless training, the cold lessons that told her never to show kindness. Yet a memory rose of a time when she had fallen as a child, and her own mother had lifted her with gentle arms. That moment of kindness had stayed with her, though she had buried it under years of war. The clan began to murmur. Some nodded at Amir's words, while others clenched their fists in anger. The old ways were strong, but doubt had been planted like a seed in dry earth. Cora turned from Amir and faced her warriors. "This human has spoken of trust. He has shown with his own hands that he values life. He has passed the trial, yet I still must decide. Do we honor the old path, or do we see with new eyes?" Her question shook the circle. For the first time, a leader of the scrawl asked openly if their way was the only way. The warriors exchanged looks. The silence was long. Amir sat quietly, giving no push to her choice. He knew the answer must come from within, not from his voice. He simply watched as Cora wrestled with her pride and her duty. At last she lowered her spear, planting its blade into the sand. "Human, you have not knelt. You have not begged. Yet you have shown courage, skill, and mercy. I cannot call you weak. But you stand against tradition, and tradition is not easily broken." Amir nodded. "Tradition is stone, but even stone can crack when new seeds push through. Perhaps I am only a seed. What grows will be for your people to choose." The young scout rose to his feet, leaning on a stick. His voice was small but steady. "Leader, I live because of him. I would have been lost in the ruins. He saved me when he could have left. If mercy is weakness, then I owe my life to weakness. But I do not feel weak. I feel stronger." The clan stirred at his words. To hear such a statement from one of their own youth carried more weight than any outsider's voice. Cora's heart trembled, but her face stayed firm. She knew the path ahead would not be simple. As night fell over the desert, torches lit the camp of the scrawl. Cora sat apart, staring at the banner. The flames reflected in her eyes as she thought of the choice before her. Kill the human and silence the questions, or spare him and risk shaking the roots of her people's belief. Amir, resting near the fire, did not speak. He watched the stars above, his calm smile unchanged. In his silence, he showed the same strength as his words. By dawn, Cora knew a decision must be made. A leader could not stand still forever, and deep inside she felt that the human's way might carry more power than the spear she held in her hands. The first light of dawn spread across the desert, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The camp of the scrawl stirred awake, their heavy armor clanking as warriors rose from rest. Fires still burned low, casting long shadows across the sand. At the center of the camp, Amir sat quietly, his eyes following the sunrise. He looked tired, but the same calm smile rested on his lips. Cora stood nearby, her spear planted in the ground beside her. She had not slept through the night. She had spent the long hours staring at the banner and listening to the voices in her heart. The choice before her was heavy. To strike down the human would mean she had followed tradition without question. To spare him would mean stepping onto a path no Skrull leader had taken before. The clan gathered, forming a circle as was their custom. They expected judgment. They expected their leader to roar and show her power. The young scout whom Amir had saved limped into the circle, leaning on his stick. He stood proudly despite his injury. His presence alone reminded all of them what had taken place in the ruins. Cora raised her voice. "Warriors of the Skrull, hear me. We came to this place to demand kneeling, to show our strength. Yet we have seen something we did not expect. This human stood against death with calm. He passed the trial we set, and he saved one of our own when he could have left him to die." Murmurs spread through the circle. Some warriors frowned, their pride wounded by the thought of honoring a human. Others nodded, remembering the boy's cries from under the stone, and the human's hands pulling him free. Amir rose slowly, standing with quiet dignity. His voice was gentle but carried clearly. "I do not ask for your kneeling. I do not ask for your surrender. I ask only for the chance to build instead of destroy. The machines you leave broken can serve you. The light you let fade can shine again. If you let me, I will show you what hands can do when they choose repair over ruin." Cora studied him, her heart heavy with decision. She thought of her own people. Her village far across the sands where a great generator stood broken. Without its power, her people suffered in the heat, struggling for water and light. No warrior had been able to mend it. Perhaps this human could. She turned back to her clan. "I will not kill him. I will not demand his kneeling. Instead, I will test him again, not with danger, but with work. If he can bring life to what is broken, then we will see if there is honor in his way." A murmur of surprise swept through the clan. Some shouted against it, calling it weakness. Others stayed silent, unsure. The young scout lifted his voice. "If weakness saved me, then I will stand with weakness. If he can mend what we cannot, then perhaps he is not weak at all." The words of the boy carried weight, for he was Skrull, born of their blood. Cora raised her spear high. "It is decided. The human will come with us. He will face no chains, no spear at his back. He will walk beside us and prove his worth." And so Amir traveled with the Skrull. Across the desert they marched together. At first, warriors watched him with suspicion, their hands never far from their weapons. But Amir walked with the same steady steps, his smile never fading. Along the way, he repaired small things they had left broken, a shattered water pump in an abandoned station, a cracked light that guided their path through the night. Each time his hands turned weakness into strength, and each time the Skrull grew quieter, watching in secret respect. At last they reached the village of Cora. It was built among tall rocks, its houses carved into the stone. But the heart of the village, the great generator, lay silent. Its once bright glow was gone, leaving the people in shadows. Children carried empty water jars, and elders sat in the heat with weary faces. Amir walked to the generator and placed his hands on its surface. "This can be healed," he said simply. He opened his kit and worked. Hours passed as he crawled inside the machine, cutting, sealing, joining broken parts. Sparks flew, dust covered him, and sweat poured down his face. The Skrull stood around him, their voices hushed. Even Cora, fierce leader of warriors, waited in silence. At last, Amir pressed the final switch. The generator shuddered, groaned, and then roared back to life. Light spread through the village. Pumps began to flow, and water rushed into the empty jars. The children cheered. The elders wept. The Skrull warriors who once laughed at Amir now stared in wonder. Cora stepped forward, her voice carrying through the village. "Today we see strength in a new form. The spear wins battles, but the hands that mend win life. This human has shown us a path beyond fear. We will not kneel, but neither will we demand kneeling. We will walk beside him and learn." The clan cheered, not with the sound of war, but with the sound of hope. For the first time, their pride was not in conquest, but in survival together. Amir wiped the sweat from his brow, his smile as calm as ever. He had not shouted, had not fought with blade, yet he had changed the hearts of warriors. In the glow of the restored generator, he stood beside Cora, both aware that the future had shifted. The story of that day spread across the desert. Traders carried the tale to distant lands. Humans were no longer seen only as prey or weak. They were seen as people who could stand with calm and bring life where there was none. And so the legend grew. The legend of a human who did not kneel, who smiled in the face of death, and who taught even the fiercest warriors that true strength could live in the hands that healed.